What if I told you the foreign policy from the Trump administration is completely for sale? That we have a policy that ignores a 50-year history of failure, a history where we train death squads in Latin America, where we create future coup leaders in Africa, and where we even train terrorists to attack our own bases. That is not a wild accusation. It is the reality of a new deal being pushed in Idaho. And while the MAGA world is losing its mind, as you might expect, the truth is, this episode is a perfect picture of the administration from Trump. It is a complete fiasco that shows no respect for our security, turns American interests upside down, and puts your life at risk. And what if I told you that MAGA might accidentally have a point, but for all the wrong reasons? It all started when the defense secretary for Trump announced that Qatar would build a training facility for its pilots on an Air Force base in Idaho. The MAGA sphere immediately exploded with racist spreading of fear about a Muslim invasion. It is the classic playbook for causing anger and instant freakout based on fear and zero information. But the real danger here is not the wild fantasy from the far right. The real danger is the terrible history of our government training future dictators and terrorists. This video is about how the latest disaster from this administration is not just a huge waste of money, but an active threat to our own national security. And it might all be connected to a very, very expensive gift. Before we expose the details of what happened here, a quick reminder that this channel is dedicated to cutting through the official narrative. If you support that mission, the best way to help is by liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives, and please leave a comment. I would love to hear what you think about all of this. Now, to truly understand the fallout, we have to look at where it all began. The response from the administration to the MAGA meltdown was just as easy to predict as the freakout itself. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had to jump on social media to clarify. He said, "To be clear, Qatar will not have their own base. We control the existing base. This is totally normal." He pointed out that Singapore already has a training program at the very same base. So this whole thing seems like an open and shut case. Another made-up outrage from the fever swamps, right? Nothing to see here, just move along. But that is where this story gets real. Because while the outrage is stupid and racist, the basic idea that this kind of deal could blow up in our faces is 100% correct. Therefore, the real story is not about one facility in Idaho. The real story is about the long, dark, and terrible history of the United States training foreign militaries. A history of creating monsters, backing coups, and fueling terrible acts. And it raises a very serious question. After decades of terrible failures, have we learned anything at all? To understand how badly this can go wrong, you have to go back to a place with a name that is famous for bad reasons, the School of the Americas. For decades, the U.S. Army ran this school at Fort Benning, Georgia. The job of the school was to train military personnel from Latin American countries. The official mission was to promote stability and democratic values. The reality was a horror show. In the 1990s, the U.S. government was forced to admit that training manuals used at the school included instructions on torture, extortion, and execution. The list of graduates from the School of the Americas reads like a list of the worst criminals of the 20th century. Manuel Noriega, the dictator from Panama. Roberto D'Aubuisson, a death squad organizer from El Salvador. These were our students, and they put their education to use. In 1989, soldiers in El Salvador murdered 6 Jesuit priests, their housekeeper, and her daughter in cold blood. Of the 27 soldiers involved in that massacre, 19 were graduates of the School of the Americas. This was not an accident. This was a direct result of a policy that gave power to and trained some of the most violent forces in the hemisphere. But the problem is not just about teaching people how to commit human rights abuses. The problem is that we make them better at overthrowing their own governments. A deep analysis from the publication War on the Rocks looked at decades of data, and what they found is shocking. When an average country receives military training from the United States, it leads to a rough doubling of the odds of a military coup in any given year. Let me say that again. We spend almost $1 billion a year on this. And the result is that we double the chances that a military will seize power. We saw it in Mali in 2012. The coup was led by a U.S.-trained captain. We saw it in Egypt. The general who overthrew the first president who was elected in a democratic way was a graduate of the U.S. Army War College. We saw it in Guinea. How does this happen? The training gives these foreign officers something more than just skills. It gives them prestige. It gives them a professional network. It teaches them to see themselves as a class apart from their own civilian government. A class that knows better, a class that feels they have a right to take over when things do not go their way. We are not just giving them weapons, we are giving them the mindset for a takeover. So, that was the past, right? The Cold War was a crazy time. We have learned our lessons since then. We have put protections in place. That would be nice to believe, but it is not true. A report from Responsible Statecraft from just last year reveals how out of control these programs still are. They looked at 2 specific programs. One is called 127E. Under this program, American commandos pay, train, and equip foreign proxy forces, and then send them on killer capture missions. You would think You would hope that we would be very careful about who we pick for these secret death squads. You would be wrong. The New York Times confirmed that these programs do not engage in human rights vetting of the people involved. We are handing guns and training to people without even checking if they are known abusers. And it gets worse. A group of senators, including Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, pointed out that our end-use monitoring is a complete joke. In theory, this is supposed to make sure our weapons do not fall into the wrong hands. In practice, we do not actually track how our weapons are used. Think about the war in Yemen. Saudi Arabia and the UAE used American-supplied bombs to kill thousands of civilians. They hit markets, funerals, school buses. And what were the consequences? Nothing. The weapons kept flowing. The State Department itself admitted that since 2012 it has not paused or canceled a single weapons sale because of an investigation into war crimes. This is the system we have. A system with no oversight, no way to hold people accountable, and no memory. Which brings us right back to that facility in Idaho. This is not just a simple training deal. It is another link in a very long chain of really bad decisions. And as an article from the Associated Press makes brutally clear, the warning signs are flashing bright red. Let us look at the evidence. The AP reports, and this is the headline, Pentagon will build a training facility for Qatari pilots in Idaho. Okay, that is the basic fact, but the article reminds us why this is so risky. It brings up an incident that everyone seems to want to forget. This is what it says. While the U.S. military has a long history of training pilots for allied countries, the practice received scrutiny in 2019 following a deadly mass shooting at Pensacola Naval Air Station that killed 3 U.S. service members and wounded several others. We trained a man who came here and murdered our own service members on our own soil. The FBI linked him to Al-Qaeda. An investigation found 21 other Saudi students who had expressed jihadist or anti-American sentiments. And what did we do? We sent them home, and then we kept training other Saudi pilots. No lessons learned. And the stakes with Qatar are very high. Donald Trump is tying us closer and closer to them, the article notes. The announcement comes just days after President Donald Trump signed an executive order vowing to use all measures, including U.S. military action, to defend Qatar. So we are not just training their pilots, we are now formally pledged to go to war for them. And why this sudden deep commitment? Why is Trump so eager to please the Qataris? Maybe, just maybe, it has something to do with this pattern of expensive gifts. The article points out one of them. Qatar also lavished a $400 million jumbo jet on Trump for use as Air Force One. A $400 million jet, and that is not all. It has also been reported that Qatar is backing a $5.5 billion golf course and resort development deal for the family business of Trump. This is not foreign policy. This is a business deal, a really, really stupid one. So here we are. Laura Loomer is screaming about a Muslim invasion in Idaho, a ridiculous racist fantasy, but the reality is so much worse. The reality is a foreign policy, run by men like Mango Mussolini, that is completely for sale. A policy that ignores a 50-year history of failure. We trained death squads in Latin America. We trained future coup leaders in Africa. We trained a terrorist who shot up a base in Florida. And now we are doing it again. For a country that bought the president a shiny new plane and is funding his family business. At a time when this administration is pulling away from our allies in Europe who have been with us for decades, it makes absolutely no sense to get friendly with a monarchy like Qatar. It is a complete turning upside down of American interests. This entire episode is a perfect picture of the administration from Trump. It is a shit show, a complete waste of time and money that shows no respect for our own security and intelligence. It is a foolish choice that puts American lives both at home and abroad at risk. So the next time you hear about a deal like this, the question is not whether we should trust our partners. The real question is, after all this time, why should anyone trust us? Truth enduring, never undone.